So before antibiotics, it was silver that was really the dominant product. Unfortunately, when the antibiotic was developed, penicillin, during the last part of the 1930s, everything shifted over to penicillin. And one of the reasons to that is that silver was never patentable in the way that penicillin was. So it's a bit sad, because with silver we have the coverage of everything from virus to bacteria to fungus and to various forms of one-celled parasites. With the penicillin, it's only bacteria. So it was a little bit like downgrading everything. But in the meantime, antibiotics could have a better effect on some forms of diseases. But I would say that the optimum way would actually to keep both products and learn how to handle them instead. But everybody just lost all interest, all knowledge about silver after 1930.
And as we all know that if we take antibiotics, we've all done it, that we lose all the beneficial bacteria in the stomach and so also.
Yeah.
What happens if you take silver instead?
That's the interesting part, because there are studies, there is common knowledge that silver in this form does not negatively affect the colon bacteria, that is the positive bacteria. And these are acidophilus and bifidus. First of all, these bacteria are what we call a gram-positive bacteria. That is, they have a little bit of a thicker cell wall that the silver does not penetrate very easily. The other thing is that when we ingest, for example, 2 teaspoons of this product that you could do when it was allowed as a food supplement, it would actually be absorbed very quickly. Maybe all of it in the stomach area or in the small intestine.
You mean less than a year ago on this?
Yeah.
When it was still allowed?
When it was allowed. The fact is that all the beneficial bacteria that we have is in the large intestine. And when the product, if the product would even come that far down before being totally absorbed, the large intestine is sort of filled with a sort of a plaque full of bacteria. And that's generally pretty dry plaque. It could be a little bit thick. So the silver will only affect, if it would affect anything, the very outer part of this part. And the silver, to be able to work the way it wants to work, is that it needs what we call a colloidal environment. And colloidal is actually what happens is if you have small particles in liquid. So milk, for example, is a colloid, where you have small particles of protein, calcium, just going around in the water. That's a colloid. Small microscopic particles in water or some other liquid, that's a colloid. That's what we have in our bodies when we look at the internal environment with the blood. Even if we look at the way the cells are organized, because we have the intracellular and the extracellular environment, which is water-based with a lot of ions, a lot of nutrition going in and out of the cells. That's where the silver in this form excels.
The problem with antibiotics, for example, that you get, I'm looking for the name of the bacteria that you get that so many people suffer from.
MRSA?
No.
No?
No.
You're talking about Candida, maybe?
Yes, I'm talking about Candida.
That's a fungus that normally lives inside your intestine. Mm-hmm. But people have seen signs of when you eat too much penicillin or antibiotics, you might get small perforations in your intestine, which makes the Candida fungus go into your bloodstream. I've heard things like Candida is actually dependent on the beneficial bacteria, the acidophilus and the bifidus, and if they are killed off by antibiotics, for example, which does happen, that's why you get a runny stomach when you take antibiotics. It's because you kill the beneficial bacteria. When they are gone, the Candida has nothing to live from, you know, because it's sort of living in symbiosis with the beneficial bacteria. And once it doesn't find anything to eat, it tends to go through the intestine out into the bloodstream. If you have real bad cases of Candida in your bloodstream, you will feel really bad. you will not have any energy, you will have brain fog. You will even see it on your tongue, because you can see a white lining on the tongue, you know, you call that
Yes.
thrush.
Yeah. I have a very private reason to inquire this area because my father was very, very ill. And I saw the way antibiotics given in large doses in the hospital, how it affected him. And I was even then confronted with the absurdity that the doctors would not allow me to give him like acidophilus or these bacteria back. I had to sneak it in via the nurses who were more on my side, but the doctors actually stopped me from doing it. So that is another story, but it is so interesting to me that had he been given colloidal silver, trusting your information, then that could have given a totally different outcome, or also to his losing a leg.
Yeah.
And it gives a lot of depth to my inquiring around your product. That's very personal. I have other people also in my brother's life.
Yeah.
But will you please continue? Where were we in your presentation?
We're talking a little bit about the silver in a historic perspective.
Yes.
And I'd like to end with saying that after they invented penicillin, it lasted, so to speak, for 20-30 years before we saw a huge income of the antibiotic resistant bacteria that it has created. Because penicillin, I think they saw even a few years after inventing penicillin that they saw that it could create resistant strains of bacteria that wouldn't be killed by penicillin. So that's why they started inventing new forms of antibiotics. And the problem with the whole thing is that when they came up into the 1960s approximately, they saw that we need to find something else, because we are having so many forms of antibiotic resistant bacteria that we need something that we can have to conquer this. There were a few doctors who actually found their way back to silver then. So in the 1960s, silver became actually a little bit fashionable again in certain areas. One area was burn wounds, and this is an area where we are still using silver a lot today.
That I know about. I've seen in the bandages and so on. With
the bandages,
yes.
and the creams. There's a special silver sulfadiazine cream, which is really good on burn wounds and has been used by doctors since the 60s, basically. And so...
Can you say the names of these doctors who kind of reinvented silver again and brought it back?
I think one was Dr. Margraf. I have it in the back of my head. I don't have it written down here, but...
Thank you.
It's out in
what happened to these doctors? Did it go well for them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, these were doctors that were researchers, so they actually developed these products that could be used for taking care of burn wounds. And we know, even though many of them might not know exactly what happens when silver is used for a burn wound, we who know a little bit more about the science behind the whole thing knows that silver in an ionic state, that is a silver ion, actually doubles the healing speed of a wound.
Wow.
It keeps it free from bacteria, fungus, virus even, and it's especially a special form of bacteria called Pseudomonas that is invading all the burn wounds eventually, and it gets really quickly resistant to all penicillins, all antibiotics. So that's why they actually saw that they needed silver, and that's why silver is more or less, it's the gold standard for burn wounds. That's what they use.
I'm very happy to hear that. So there is absolute evidence, even now in modern time, that silver has survived in certain aspects of medicine where it's very successful.
Definitely.
Definitely.
And I'm really glad it is this way, because it gives us some background to the product we're working with, you know. So,
are there any other examples in modern times where silver is still being used? For example, the way it's allowed now as a water purifier?
Oh, you can use it as a general disinfectant on surfaces, for example, in your kitchen. That's no problem. Even our product is approved for that.
And for drinking water?
Yeah, and the way that we sell it today is actually as a water disinfectant. That has to do with the way that the European Union has been changing its laws when it comes to food supplements. As of 1st of January 2010, it's not allowed to sell silver as a food supplement, unfortunately. It still is in the United States, for example, with 10 million users. So it's not the fact that silver from the beginning of 2010 has become dangerous or even toxic. Silver in this form is totally non-toxic, and both the EPA and the WHO has shown that you can ingest 6 teaspoons daily, each and every day for 80 years without it being toxic or being above safe limits. What we call the NOAEL, so it's non-observed adverse effect level. That's a fancy word for saying that it's totally safe as long as you keep under 10 grams of ingested silver during a lifetime. And these levels are actually not totally scientific, because they are based on the fact that they assume that all the silver that you ingest stays in the body. We have so many studies, and general knowledge says that about 90 to 99% of the silver that you ingest today has been excreted within 48 hours. So that's a natural way of the body to take in minerals and to release minerals, especially the excess amounts.
How come that the Americans are so capable of ingesting silver and surviving it with no problems, and we cannot do that here in the Europe?
Well, it's all a matter of laws and regulations, unfortunately. But I know for a fact that there are actually a couple of companies that are trying to get it back on the positive list on EFSA's, the European Food Safety Authorization, on their list of allowed minerals to sell. And it wasn't only silver that was gone after 2010. There was about 40 different minerals and trace elements that was banned from the use as a food supplement. One of the more useful minerals was vanadium.
Like in chrome, vanadium, steel?
Yep. And we know that vanadium is a very capable mineral of working against diabetes, for example. It can actually
That sounds very beneficial, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I have heard about gold, silver and platinum being forbidden, but these other 12 minerals are always mentioned, and 12 other minerals are being forbidden. Why are they being forbidden when they have been used for a long time, as far as I understand? What is the...
Well, it's unfortunately it's not based on facts and science. It's more based on interests in the world of the pharmaceuticals, for example. Because a lot of the rules and regulations that we are getting today is actually something that is from a wish list of a pharmaceutical company or from the pharmaceutical area, I'd say, to get rid of certain products. Unfortunately.
That sounds outrageous.
It is.
Are you implying that our best interest might not be the main focus for the pharmaceutical industry?
We're living in an economical world where a lot of people, a lot of companies just grab whatever they think is theirs to grab. And the little guy is unfortunately the guy who is left behind. So the consumers, the people who have diseases, are not getting the optimum treatment, unfortunately.
That's a very unhappy development, isn't it?
It is. It's a very sad development.
What can we do about that? Is there anything that we can do to prevent that from taking...
I'd say information is really important, and that's a little bit why we're sitting here today talking to you guys. We have to spread the information on the fact that nobody's really looking after you here. All the big companies are being looked after by the authorities. They have all the good contacts, they have the money, they can do whatever they want, basically.